A few weeks ago, a post went viral on Twitter. An engineer wrote 4 words that stopped people mid-scroll. I was a 10x engineer. Now I am useless. He wasn't being dramatic. He was describing something real, that the skills he had spent decades sharpening, the identity he built around being exceptional at his craft had been destabilized so fast he didn't have language for what he was experiencing. The post got thousands of responses. And what struck me wasn't the debate about whether AI really changes things that fast. It was how many people replied with some version of, "Me too." I've seen the same moment happen up close. Not in tech, but across industries, across career stages. And I have felt a version of that myself too. When I switched roles and I realized how much I didn't know about what I was supposed to be doing, how different the skills were, and how differently I needed to think and speak and carry myself. That's when I felt the shift. Not when I read about the disruption, but when I believed it. Here's what I want to offer you today. Not a prediction about what AI will do to your field, because I genuinely do not have one, and neither does anyone who says they do with certainty. What I can offer is a way of navigating this that puts you back in the driver's seat, not of the future, but of your response to it. Here's what's different about AI anxiety versus other career disruptions most of us have weathered. When you switch careers, or move industries, or face a market downturn, threat is legible. You can point to it, you can research it, you can find people who have navigated something similar. What's disorienting about AI is that the threat is diffuse and fast-moving at the same time. It's not, hey, your company is restructuring. It's the nature of expertise itself that might be changing, and we don't fully know in which direction, at what speed, or for whom. The information fire hose makes it worse. There's a new model, a new capability, a new take every single day. And the human brain, when flooded with ambiguous threat signals, does not become more strategic. It narrows, it hunts for certainty, it starts treating I don't know as danger. This is the same thing I see in a lot of smart founders and executives I work with. They come from engineering or scientific backgrounds. They are wired to solve problems, but they try to solve this one entirely inside their own heads, and they don't have enough data yet to make those conclusions. So they spin. The intelligence that usually protects them starts working against them. When you are in that state, certain voices become magnetic. Right now, there are people telling you exactly what will happen. Your role is gone. Your role is fine. Learn to code. Coding is dead. Pivot immediately. Stay the course. Some of these people are brilliant. Some of them are just loud. And in an anxious state, it's very hard to tell the difference because confidence sounds like competence. Nate Silver described 2 types of thinkers, foxes and hedgehogs. Hedgehogs know one big thing and apply it everywhere with total conviction. They are compelling to listen to. Historically, their predictions are worse. Foxes, on the other hand, hold multiple possibilities simultaneously. They assign rough probabilities. They update when new information arrives, less satisfying but better calibrated. Certainty is a painkiller for anxiety. It doesn't change what's actually on the ground. The change I want to suggest is stop asking what will happen and start asking what is the most plausible range of outcomes and how do I stay positioned across all of them. That's the main question. The question of what will happen just fits the spiral. Pause for a second and notice how have you been listening to this? Have you been building a case for why your situation is different? Thinking about a colleague this applies to, maybe half agreeing or half resisting. That negotiation, cycling between denial, catastrophizing, depending on what you read last. This is where people are living with this question. It is not a character flaw, it's what happens when a well-trained brain hits a genuinely novel situation without enough data to resolve. Recognizing that is not a small thing. That awareness is where a response starts replacing reaction. Here's where I want to reframe something. Because this is the part that took me the longest to learn. When I moved from fintech to aerospace, I walked into rooms full of people who had been there for decades. The ones who were the hardest to be around were the most confident ones, because they could smell immediately whether what I was saying was accurate. There was no faking expertise I didn't have. What worked wasn't pretending. I was going to places where I was confident, where I had real authority, and operating from there, then slowly expanding outwards, introducing elements of new context, the new relationships, the new industry. Eventually, people in the new domain started coming to me as authority in something they didn't know. And that let me transfer their trust into the areas where I was still learning. What I didn't have was data. I had skills. Those are different things. The concept I've come back to repeatedly in my own transitions and in working with founders is the beginner's mind. Not beginner's skills, beginner's mind. It means understanding that you already have transferable capability from everything you've built. You just have no data yet in the new domain. And as you gather that data, you can trust yourself to solve problems that arise because you've solved hard problems before. You just haven't solved these problems yet. That acceptance makes you more sensitive towards yourself. It lets you ask more questions. It keeps the learning channel open instead of defending. Once you accept that you don't need to know everything, just the right things, the practical question becomes, how do you stay genuinely informed without it consuming you? Well, here's a few things they can try. 1, start with a time budget. How many hours per week are you actually willing to invest in tracking AI's impact on your field? Decide before you start consuming. Without a budget, everything feels an obligation, and you either drown or go numb. With a budget, you have permission to stop. Find translators and not just experts. Before I made the move to aerospace, I ran what I call a small research project. I went to conferences, had direct conversations, asked about 30 people roughly 20 questions about what it was like to work in the industry. One question I asked was, do you have a backup career? Finance people almost always said yes. Aerospace people almost never did. They were all in. That answer, that level of commitment helped me decide. The data didn't come from reading. It came from being in the room with people who were living it. Find those people for your field, the ones who look the most like you professionally, who are actively working through the same questions. 3, set a goalpost before you search. One sentence, I want to understand X, is when you can answer X, stop. Without that sentence, every article becomes a reason to read another article. And last, assign probabilities, not verdicts. When you read a prediction, ask, what is the likelihood I would give this? And what is the new information would make me revise this? This keeps you from being locked into any single narrative, including this one. All right, and here's what it gets a little bit more personal. That engineer who posted, I was 10x engineer and now I'm useless, his crisis wasn't really about skills. It was about identity. The story he'd built about who he was, what made him valuable, what he earned, that story was suddenly in question. And an identity crisis is a different problem than a skills gap. I see this in executives and founders I work with. A lot of the most painful stuck points aren't about strategy. They're about the distance between who someone has been and who they need to become, and all the accumulated investment that sits between those two things. One exercise I use is going back through someone's career and looking for the moments that created genuine passion or aliveness, not accomplishment. The experiences. What was actually happening when work felt the most meaningful? What patterns show up? Because if you can identify those, you can start asking, how do I bring more of that forward? Even if the specific domain shifts. The market does not accommodate our egos or our tenure. It responds to usefulness. But usefulness is not fixed. It's a moving relationship between your capability and what the market needs. Your job is to understand that relationship clearly enough to keep adjusting. Your goals will probably change. The question isn't whether to hold them tightly or abandon them. It's whether you can hold them loosely enough to update the path while keeping the deep values they were pointing toward impact. That's not one-time exercise. It's a short, regular check-in. What new data do I have that doesn't shift, and what one concrete next move I can make? In a few weeks, something changes when you approach this with a system rather than a mood. The fire hose does not slow down, but you stop trying to drink all of it. You have a budget, a filter, a handful of people whose perspective you actually trust. People who are in the room with the reality you're navigating. Within a month, the anxiety doesn't disappear, but it becomes directional. It points towards specific questions rather than spreading into general dread. That's the difference between anxiety as noise and anxiety as signal. And over time, the capacity to navigate high uncertainty, to hold multiple possibilities, to gather real data, update without panic, becomes the most durable skill you can carry. More portable than any specific technical knowledge. Precisely because the pace of change is not slowing down. The engineer in that post, he's not useless. He is in the middle of an identity transition that millions of skilled people are navigating right now. The ones who come out on the other side aren't the ones who predicted the future correctly. They are the ones who learned to keep moving through uncertainty without needing it to resolve before they took the next step. If something here shifted the question from I need certainty about what's coming to I can navigate whatever comes, that shift is what this channel is about. Not predictions, not false confidence, a way of staying clear, informed, and in motion when clarity is genuinely hard to come by. Subscribe if that's the kind of thinking you want more of.